Hey y'all, I'm Mindy with Rod and Grill.
All opinions in this show are solely mine.
With that said, let's dive into this case, the boys on the tracks.
In the early morning hours of August 23, 1987, a freight train was moving through rural Arkansas. As the engineer approached a stretch of track, he noticed something lying across the rails. At first, he thought it was a tarp, but as the train got closer, he realized it was something far worse. 2 teenage boys were lying on the railroad tracks. Those boys were Don Henry, age 16, and Kevin Ives, age 17. Their deaths would spark one of the most controversial investigations in Arkansas history, a case now known as the boys on the tracks. At the center of the controversy was a medical examiner whose findings would raise some serious questions. That man was Fahmy Malek. On the evening of August 22nd, 1987, Kevin Ives asked his mother if he could go out with his friend Don Henry. The 2 boys were close friends and spent much of their time together. Kevin told his mother they were going to drive out into the countryside near Saline County, Arkansas, close to Bryant. It was a quiet rural area surrounded by woods and railroad tracks, but that night would be the last time their family saw them alive. Just after 4 a.m., a freight train traveling through the area saw something ahead on the tracks. The engineer hit the brakes immediately, but trains need a long distance to stop. By the time the train finally came to a halt, it had already passed over the 2 bodies. Authorities arrived and confirmed the victims were Don Henry and Kevin Ives. Very quickly, investigators offered an explanation. They claimed the boys had been smoking marijuana on the railroad tracks, passed out, and were struck by the train. The deaths were ruled an accident. The first autopsy was conducted by the Arkansas State Medical Examiner, Fahmy Malek. Malek concluded that the boys had died as a result of the train impact. According to his findings, there was no evidence of foul play, but many people, including the families of the boys, believed the explanation didn't make sense. How could 2 teenagers simply pass out on an active railroad track? And why were there so many unusual details surrounding the scene? At the time, Fahmy Malek was already a controversial figure in Arkansas. He had been criticized in other cases for conclusions that some investigators believed were questionable. Despite the controversy, Malek remained the state's chief medical examiner under Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton. During Clinton's time as governor, Malek even received a salary increase, which later became a point of criticism among those who believed the medical examiner's work should have been more closely scrutinized. Critics argued that Malek's findings in several cases, including the deaths of Don Henry and Kevin Ives, deserved further review. Because of growing public pressure, the boys' families arranged for a second autopsy. This examination revealed troubling details. The report suggested that Kevin Ives may have suffered blunt force trauma to the head before the train ever arrived. Some investigators began to question whether the boys were already unconscious or dead before they were placed on the tracks. If that were true, the train might have only covered up what had already happened. Other details raised even more questions. Reports indicated that a green tarp-like material had been found near the bodies. Some investigators wondered whether the boys had been moved or covered before the train struck them. There were also reports of fibers and debris on the boys' clothing that suggested they might have been somewhere else earlier that night. These details fueled speculation that the boys might have encountered something dangerous in the woods near the railroad tracks. Over time, rumors began circulating that the teens may have stumbled upon illegal activity in the area, possibly involving drug trafficking operations. Some investigators explored whether the boys had witnessed something they weren't supposed to see. The case later became associated in public discussions with larger allegations involving organized crime and corruption in Arkansas. However, many of these claims were never proven in court. The deaths of Don Henry and Kevin Ives were reviewed multiple times by investigators. Evidence was re-examined, witnesses were interviewed, and the case continued to draw attention from journalists and independent investigators. Despite the renewed scrutiny, no one was ever charged with the deaths. The official cause of death remained controversial. More than 35 years later, the Boys on the Tracks case continues to be discussed by true crime researchers. Many believe the original investigation, including the autopsy conducted by Fahmy Malik, left important questions unanswered. Others believe the case was ultimately explained by tragic circumstances. But for the families of Don Henry and Kevin Ives, the mystery has never truly been resolved. Two teenagers went out for a drive on a summer night in Arkansas. By morning, they were dead on a railroad track. What really happened in Saline County, Arkansas that night remains one of the most debated mysteries in the state's history. And decades later, people are still asking the same question. Was it truly an accident? Or is there more to the story of the Boys on the Tracks case that has never been fully uncovered?